I met Sally in her current role of the chair of the ANZCCJ. So that is the Australian New Zealand Chamber of Commerce in Japan. And Sally, that's only one of your myriad of roles. Isn't that correct? What's your current role?
That's right, Brittany. And what a pleasure it was to meet you that night. And I believe it was our mutual friend, Emmy,
Yes.
who spotted another tall blonde Australian and thought we'd match.
Actually, well, let's go back a second. This is exactly how this happened. She said, because we were working together on a project, and she said, do you know Sally? She's a tall blonde. And I thought, just because I'm a tall blonde and she's a tall blonde doesn't mean we know each other or have anything in common. And then as I got to know you, I adore you. I adore all the work that you do. And I couldn't wait to have this opportunity to connect and learn more about you. So yes, it certainly was. And that evening, I actually won for the very first time a raffle. I've never won a raffle before. And I ended up winning the dinner at the rugby fundraiser.
Did you?
Yes.
Oh, well
yes,
done.
Yes.
Great. I'm glad that ticket went to a good home then. Good. Well, no, that was a great event. That was an annual event that we do at the embassy every year. And I think it was the gourmet garden party.
Right. That's right.
Right. So yes, as you said, that's one of my roles. But my main role, the role where I actually get paid to do my job, is working for the South Australian government in Japan. So we opened the office in March last year. The South Australian government didn't have a presence for over 20 years, I believe.
Wow.
So we opened the office. I'm embedded in the embassy, but I'm not an embassy person. I'm the commissioner. So I'm just responsible for trade out of SA into Japan and investment from Japan into South Australia.
Okay, Sally, before we jump into it, I have a sneaking suspicion that maybe you had something to do with the fact that South Australia didn't have a presence in Japan and then magically then now does. Is that right?
Magically now does. Well, you know, Brittany, every time South Australians came to market, they would say, oh, where's our office? Well, what do we do here? And there's nothing. And I would say, well, you've got an open office. You've got to have a presence. If you expect to sell your stuff, if you expect to get investment, that's not going to happen just by magic. And people don't know South Australia.
Yeah.
So, they think it's the whole of the southern part of Australia. We could be anywhere. We could be in Western Australia. We could be Tasmania. But so there was really a lack of presence that was quite obvious. And so I would just harp onto all and sundry about the fact that we need an office. And then very miraculously, our current premier visited Japan and I met him. I think the words were, our former chamber ED called me and said, you're the only South Australian we know. Can you go and talk with this guy? He's the leader of the opposition in South Australia. He's in Japan. So I went and met him, our Premier Stephen Marshall, who is a fantastic person. And he said, but when I get elected, I'm going to open an office in South Australia office in Tokyo.
Okay.
And I thought, all right, yeah, sure. But then he did. So then I put my hand up.
Absolutely, but I feel like that this is absolutely representative of your career, that idea to see something and then to stick with it. But before we jump into that, I'd love that, you know, the fact that you opened exactly a year ago or a little more than a year ago, if you were to open in March 2020, it would have been a totally different experience. Can you talk a little bit about how the COVID experience or how working remote work or has affected your current role or your current work?
Well, it's been difficult. I don't think they would have opened an office in 2020, to be honest. Or they may have opened it without all the, pomp and circumstance that goes with the opening of something like this. But it has been tricky, but we've soldiered on. I'm still really busy. There's this term, Zoom scare. I have Zoom scare
そうですね。
Zoom or
Zoom.
Zoom.
So, for anyone who doesn't speak Japanese, Zoom kind of means that you get tired from Zoom, which you can understand. You know, just these back-to-back meetings are just totally just taking their toll.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So yes, but we're soldiering on, and it's sometimes difficult because, as you know, in Japan, a lot of what you do is face to face, and even if you go and talk about nothing, just an aisatsu meeting with a customer, an aisatsu meeting, just going over to say hello, how are you? That's really, really important, and that's tricky to do with the Zoom. And a lot of Japanese people don't want to put their cameras on. They don't want to come in. They come in from the phone, and it's a bit tricky. But we've soldiered on, and we're doing okay here. There are a lot of projects that required visits by Japanese people to South Australia that have been put on hold. But everyone's optimistic that these projects will go ahead, and they're just waiting for the go ahead to be able to get on a plane and visit.
Right, it's that true sort of gambaru spirit, right, which is true of Japan, but it's certainly also true of you. So if we were to go back, really, really back to when you first came to Japan, can you share a little bit about your first formative stories of Japan? Because now you're one of the representatives of the Australian government, you're one of the most connected people in Tokyo, and it seems like things kind of fell into place, but I have done my research and read up on you, and I know it wasn't always the case. That wasn't always the way. So can we go back a little bit to give listeners some hope that things do act, there is light at the end of the tunnel. So how did that tunnel really begin for you?
Well, Brittany, I came over into the year 2000, actually, in August, and it's very, very different 20 years ago to what it is now. And I was in Saitama. I was stuck out in Saitama. I wasn't deep, dark Saitama. I was just past Ikebukuro Saitama, but it was it was an unusual place. And I was here on a working holiday visa, and I only planned to be here for a year to teach English. And obviously
you missed your flight back.
I did that. I missed my flight back. At that time, actually, I flew over on ANZCCJ, and ANZCCJ collapsed in my time here, so I actually did not have a flight back. I mean, I don't know if you know about that, Brittany, because you're significantly younger than I am.
Yes.
But at that time, and I actually, and you can't even do this anymore. It's been a long time that you've been able to go into the cockpit and talk to the pilot, but I did that on my way over even. So that's how long ago we're talking. Yeah. But I decided to, I wanted to stay on, and I thought I go to Japanese school because I had been to Japan before as an exchange student, and I'd studied Japanese, but my Japanese was pretty poor. I thought, I'll be fine, and no, it wasn't fine.
Right.
So, of course, finding a Japanese school, a serious Japanese school, not a conversation school, that would take me was very tricky. And I thought, this was when I first kind of came up against that, no, you can't do it. Because a lot of the schools that were serious, all morning or all afternoon or all day Japanese courses, they were for university entrance. And most of the, at that time, most of the students studying were Chinese or Korean or Burmese students from other Asian countries or Southeast Asian countries. And they would just flat out say, no, we don't have a course for you. You're an English speaker. You're not from China. You're not going to keep up.
With the country,
and
right.
I thought, oh, this can't be right. So I kept ringing around. I really want to go to your school. I'm interested in studying Japanese properly. No. Do you want to go to university? And at that time, I had no intention to go to university here. No, oh, you can't. So finally, I found this terrific school in Hiro, and I went there for a year and a half, I think. I don't know. Well, it seemed like a long time. And they accepted me, which was terrific, but it just amazed me that no one wanted me to go to their school. I couldn't understand it. I thought, you don't want the money, you don't want an extra student. Why would you not want that? But they just didn't want the bother, I think. And then, of course, I got into I thought, yeah, well, actually, I might apply and go to university here. And this was about halfway through my course, and I started looking at universities and applying. And they'd go to open days, and they'd just look at me like, what are you doing here?
Right, you're in the wrong. You're
lost. Are
Mm-hmm.
you okay? Yeah,
you're lost.
Or can you speak Japanese? We don't do courses in English here. And I would say, I'm not interested in doing an English course. Or we don't do language courses. I'm not interested in that. And I studied sociology eventually. And even when I sat exams and I got through to the interview stage, they would say, the interviewers would say, why are you here?
Yeah.
What are you doing? And I couldn't understand why on earth they'd be asking me that. It was just, I'd never had someone say, why on earth are you here, so much to me in my life, ever, before coming to Japan.
Right.
Why are you here? What are you doing? You don't belong here.
Right, absolutely.
And then the university that I went to Nihon University, and they were the first people to say, hey, welcome, come on board, we're glad to have you here. Yeah, they thought I was German, mind you. However, it's another story.
So then after university and all of this, journey for just to get into university, there obviously was something inside you that said, this is the place for you. There was something about it that said, yeah, there's something, here for you, Sally. So what was then life after university for you? What was those kind of initial jobs? Because this is what people often say, is that, you can come to Japan as a university student, or you can come as an English teacher, but they find incredible difficulty or incredible frustration in those transitional phases, like from company to company or from student to company. What was yours like?
So, as university students here, I did a 4-year degree, and usually around the end of your second year, you start doing your shukatsu. Yeah.
Your job. Your job
hunting. Yes. So I went along. I signed up to Rikunabi and all these kind of event, all these companies that did events for job hunting, and you go in and they'd give you a red lanyard or a blue lanyard, and that would mean if you're science or humanities. And I'd have humanities because I was doing an arts degree in sociology. And it didn't matter. They didn't care. They just saw foreigner and thought, oh, bilingual. And a lot of companies would say, oh, are you interested in working for XYZ? We've got this program. And I had no interest in working for, IBM or companies like that. They didn't care. They were just looking for talent, I suppose, for, bicultural, bilingual talent.
Right.
And then when it got to my third year, I was just kind of fluffing around, not doing much. I was working at the time at a small, very kind of old-fashioned Japanese company that sold. Well, they imported really high-end audio, so that either super wealthy people or complete audio freaks would buy, and it was a wonderful learning experience for me on really old school Japanese work style.
Yeah,
it was just terrific.
When you think of that time, what were those things where you think, wow, this is that Japan that people talk about, like 1923,
Well, we had a tea lady.
That was the only job.
And her job was to make tea. Shacho, the Mr.
CEO?
Nishikawa would sit at like the top of the room, and we were in lines. I was directly in front of him. I mean, I was there a couple of hours a week. I was, it was my part-time job.
Right.
And he literally used to pat me on the head. He would pat me on the head. Like, you can't do that. You can't do that. But, he was like, oh, Sally-chan. Yeah, so, I mean, I'd get dragged out everywhere with him. He was an older, he was probably over 70 at the time. He's a car collector. So we'd drive down to Narita in his, Maserati or whatever car he had at the time.
At that time,
yeah. And he'd go, 200 k's an hour down there. And, I mean, it was great. It was something that you could never learn anywhere else. Yeah. It was just amazing. So they wanted me to keep working there, which, I mean, I didn't want to do that. I mean, as much as I enjoyed the experience, I wasn't an audio engineer, and didn't really want to be in that environment for longer than I really had to. But so I was there up until I graduated. But I think in my third or fourth year, we have Zemi here in Japanese university, so it's like a tutorial, I suppose.
Yeah.
And for the third and fourth year, you have the same Zemi teacher. So I had Kon Sensei, who was great. He was a terrific guy, and he really pushed me to do things that I felt very uncomfortable doing. But now I think, thanks for doing that, Kon Sensei. So every opportunity he had me standing in front of a crowd giving a speech or talking about my experience or anything. I don't know why he did that. Maybe because it was interesting to have this German in his tutorial. But no, he was great, and I'm really glad he did that. He really pushed me a lot. But he said, what do you want to write about for your thesis? And I said, about, I can't even remember what I wanted to write about. And he said, do you really want to write about that? And I said, no.
Not really.
And he said, what do you love, or what do you think is, something you're really passionate about that you could write about for 80 pages? And I said, well, I'm from South Australia, and wine is our thing in South Australia, and I can't find it here. There's only Hardy's Stamp of Australia at that time and Yellowtail. And that's what Japanese people think Australian wine is, and why.
Refrigerated red wine.
Yes.
Refrigerated
red wine.
Refrigerated
red wine, straight from the fridge. Glass even, straight from the fridge. So he said, write about that. So I did. And I wrote about how... Japan is facing, well, at that time, it was big news. I don't know, it's not so big now. It's kind of, a fact of life. But at that time, this problem of an aging society and women going on to higher education and
then dropping off.
Not getting married and having kids.
Mm-hmm.
But these changes in Japanese society were actually very they were great for the wine industry, because these young women in particular were going out and drinking Australian wine.
Right.
And thanks to them, there's this generation of people, 70, 60, 50-year-olds who only drink Italian or French wine. And then there's this whole new generation of mainly younger women who were, going into different regions in different countries and experimenting with what at that time, this is like 2008, with this new world wine that was still relatively new to the Japanese market. So that's what I wrote about, and I sent that thesis to my to the person who ended up employing me. And there was no job or anything, but I sent it to him. I looked at a few wine importers and I sent it to this guy, a Kiwi called Carl Robinson, who ran a company still runs a company called Jeroboam. And I sent it to him and said, I really want to work in the wine industry. And so I went in for an interview and he said, I don't have a job here for you, but I'll make one. Is if you can write this and if you can send it to me and come in here and tell me that with that passion, then that you obviously can do something.
There's something.
And that's how we started.
I love this so much, because this idea of finding something, working through the challenges, but then being able to identify not simply what your passion is, but to identify what's the next sensible, what's the next proactive step that I can take, has really been very much kind of that golden thread in a way of your career. It was even true of the story that you just told us about opening an office in South Australia. This is, there's one thing about passion, but the other thing is, okay, how can we really deliver on that? How can we deliver not only on the passion for ourselves, but also how can we deliver value for people around us? So walking into an industry that's new, in a country that's traditionally slow to change, particularly when it comes to a conservative industries, right? Like wine or anything that's to do with Europe, the Japanese are like a little bit touchy on, because it's supposed to be a little bit more sophisticated, than Australia. What was it like, that journey working in the wine industry with those, and because wine connoisseurs are known to be, have a very strict view on things anyway, right? Anyway, and so what was this like then in Japan?
Well, at that time, I think Jeroboam Carl was my boss, he's a Kiwi, and then about 10 or so staff, Japanese staff, and then me. And I think in the beginning it was kind of like a novelty to have another foreigner there. And his company grew a lot after that. He's probably got 25 staff now, and I don't think I think I was the first and last other foreigner to join his company. But I think, you get a little bit of leeway as a foreigner, because you go in, and as you rightly said, this is a very conservative industry, and it's changed remarkably. Back then, you'd have these wine tastings where sommeliers and wine buyers and restaurateurs and people in the industry would come in, and they come in, they get a glass, and they go around, and I would, excuse me, we'd all be stationed behind, if it was a new world tasting, stationed behind that state, for example, like SA is quite broad, like Clare Valley or Barossa Valley or something. And at that time, people would come up with a glass, not even look at you, just stick the glass out, expect wine to be poured in it. And I'd be like, oh, this is from Barossa Valley and da-da-da, and
Right.
barrel
Sharing the
age and blah,
story a
blah, blah,
little
blah.
bit, you know,
Yeah,
storytelling. Yeah.
talking about the product, and they'd just spit the wine out and move on. And I thought, God, this is a bit... But what we... and I think what we did, which was at that time, which was fortuitous now, considering we've gone back to... not gone back, but gone to buying wine online. But at that time, 2008, it was I joined, and then the Lehman shock happened.
Right.
So we really had to change the way of doing wine in Japan, because people weren't going out. People weren't buying expensive wine. People were really, and I think, I mean, it's probably worse than it is now. It was just a really dreadful time then.
And add on to that wine in Japan is like something you do in a restaurant. Like the fact that
exactly.
you buy a bottle of wine at home, that was kind of a little bit strange, because wine is kind of this, we go out kind of mentality.
Yes.
The idea that we grab a bottle of wine and we have it at dinner, that's still, I would say, quite... there's certain niches or certain market segments of Japan that's very much the practice, but there's still very much you have wine at home.
Exactly.
Kind of
Yes. Exactly. It's a celebration thing. Or you're exactly right. It was, and particularly at that point, it was like that.
Right.
But this happened. People went buying wine, so we started this wine club. Where things were done, we'd send out offers online, we'd send out offers to a mailing list, and then we'd do events outside, we'd do wine tasting events, parties, and that's where, they were immensely popular, and that's where I met most of the people I know today. And our mutual friend, was at a wine event, a wine dinner, and I think one of the successes of that was that you suddenly had this foreign woman in there organising these things, and people were attracted to that. I think that kind of novelty, and if you make a mistake or if you do the wrong thing, you get a little bit of leeway sometimes. But then again, it's in steps, and I'm sure you know this really well, Brittany. You have, from first meeting, for example, when you meet someone, if you make a mistake or what have you, all is forgiven. And then you get to a point where, particularly if you're a Japanese-speaking foreign person, you get to a point where you're probably judged more harshly.
Shorter leash.
I think.
Much shorter leash.
Right, exactly. So there are these different stages of acceptance, I think.
I couldn't agree more. And this is something that I've seen you do so well, is that you've been able to build environments or create environments and experiences for people, as well as relationships, that are equally on your terms, but as well as being respectful of those around you, right? And I think this is such a sensitive balance in Japan. And as you very rightly mentioned, Sally, often people, there's this beginning phase of, if you say konnichiwa, people are like, oh, your Japanese is so great, But then as you start speaking professional Japanese, and maybe you mix up keigo, so instead of, sasete kudasai, you say itadakimasu or something, they're like, well, that's wrong, and you're like, give me some slack. So can you tell me a little bit about how you've been able to manage building these relationships, creating these experiences for people without, completely checking in your personality at the door, which is what worries many people about working or being in.
I think I think my personality is like, I'm a naturally very shy person, and I'm not one to toot my own horn at all. I'm not like that at all. And I think, and I know people go, "Oh no, you're not," but I am. And I think I don't know. I just I am able to build a rapport with, particularly with Japanese people, because I understand that shyness, and I think people find me quite genuine. I'm a genuine person, and I think Japanese people can relate to me in that sense. And also, Brittany, I started building this network in the wine industry, so doing my wine events and what have you, and I'm providing something really yummy and a fun experience. So of course people gravitated to that. That's the trick, you know. So I was always, you know, whenever I met these people, I'd be holding a bottle of wine in my hand or pouring them a glass of wine. So that helped as well.
Right, of course, they must know you as that. I love that. Now,
yeah, I'm known as the wine lady. Seriously.
Well, it's better than the insurance lady or something like that. So as you began creating this connection to the wine industry, and you began, you know, being known, people knew that if they thought of Australian wine, and, you know, they immediately thought of you. At what point did you start? Did the chamber, so the Australian New Zealand Chamber of Commerce, which is a huge part of your life, you've done so much for the chamber. When was it for you that you started either engaging in the chamber, not only just probably as a member, but really as that that you wanted to move into more of a leadership role?
Well, I think my first chamber event was at the New Zealand Embassy, and I have a feeling that my boss, as I mentioned before, my boss at the time was a Kiwi, and he didn't want to go to something and made me go, and I reckon that's how it started. So I went on behalf of him to this chamber event, and then realised that we could actually promote our wine through the chamber. So at that time we had the Food, Agriculture, Hospitality Committee. I mean, it's our strongest committee at the chamber. It's still there, but at that time, it perhaps was run by someone involved in the wine industry. I'm not sure, but I asked if I could join, and I remember being really nervous going to the first meeting, and I went along and talked about, you know, what I was doing, and I worked for Jeroboam and selling Australian New Zealand wine, and then I just got. The more I went along, I suppose I used to bring bottles of wine with me. We ended up having the meetings at our office. And I think that's when we introduced like having meetings out at restaurants and venues that were members of the chamber that had our wine. And I just used the opportunity, or leveraged the opportunity, to promote what I was selling as much as possible. And I would just stick my hand up for anything, you know, what can we do? We need to do this kind of event. I'd say, okay, yeah, please let me be involved. I'll help. I've got a network of people who we can, you know, invite or what have you. So just putting myself out there, that's how it all happened, I suppose. And then when you've got someone who's willingly putting their hand up, you kind of go to them every time, don't you? Right. Because for one person who's going to put their hand up, there's, you know, 1,000 behind them who don't want to do anything. Yeah. So that's how it all happened. And here I am.
Yeah, exactly. And it's been, if I think of, you know, that time from when you first came to the chamber, I've been involved in different chamber events, not only the Australian Chamber of Commerce, but also some other chambers of commerce, also in Europe. The Australian Chamber of Commerce, the Australian New Zealand Chamber of Commerce
Yeah.
in Japan, in Japan has a different feel than the other chambers. As much as that the Australians are there to do business, they're there to promote their products, they're there to sell Australia, there's a certain atmosphere about it. And I very much, I've not only seen it myself, but I've heard it from other people that very much comes from you as well. What kind of things can you do when you're in these kinds of huge associations where you look around and you think, I'm one of 1,000, or, you know, I'm one of 2,000 people? Is it simply a case of just putting your hand up? Is there anything else that maybe comes to mind that really drove that open kind of fun culture of the chamber? Well, wine.
I'm really,
Bring wine all the
bring
time.
wine.
Bring wine all the time.
No, I'm really happy to hear that, and I'm so glad you feel that way. That you go there and you feel it's, you know, a welcoming environment. I'm really, really happy to hear that, because that's the aim. And you know, when I joined, it was, I really felt like a tiny little kid who didn't belong there, to be honest, because there are, you know, there are a lot of huge businesses involved in the chamber. There's, you know, huge, there's banks, real estate companies, insurance companies, and what have you. But, you know, I was from an SME, and I really felt we needed, SMEs are the backbone of everywhere, and they make up a huge portion of the chamber even now. And I really felt there was a need for SME representation. And I think so now as well. We have to be mindful that there are a lot of companies in Japan that might only be one person or two people, and they need to have the same access as everyone else. So, you know, we have an executive council that is made up of a number of different industry leaders, and we have our you know, FARC committee, the Food Agriculture Committee. We've got a Sports for Business committee, and we've got another committee coming up that will be around innovation, tech and education, research. So we try and get as many people as involved as we can. I think the more people you've got involved, the more diverse that little ecosystem is, the more success you're going to have.
Right. And this is something that I've seen in my peer group. So if I go back 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when we were kind of coming through the Japanese universities, and now I think 10 years on, some of us are leading APAC divisions, and some of us are, you know, have opened companies, for example. And one thing that I think is interesting is, wow, we've got a new kind of influx of people, whereas I think maybe you were very much kind of that bridge between these kinds of two worlds of the only reason that you would ever open a business or you would ever go to Japan to do business is because you're a part of a multinational network of, you know, people, or maybe it's a multinational company, whatever it is. But this is kind of, you know, that new kind of wave of, you know, Japanese investment coming from small to medium businesses. And me being, or our business, Design Thinking Japan, being a chamber member, one thing that was really important to me was I want to be around people who share the same business values as I do. That was something that, one of the reasons why I kind of enjoy doing business in Japan. I know lots of people, you know, Germans like yourself, Sally, you know, you know, everyone listening, Sally's not German. She's not. She's you know, they have a very strict private life and kind of social life and professional life. Whereas I very much enjoy having a personal relationship with the people that I'm doing business with. So that's maybe kind of my Japanese side. And I thought that a really great place to go is the Australian New Zealand Chamber of Commerce. And one thing that maybe we can share a little bit about is the kinds of benefits or why it would be interesting for small to medium businesses, or how they could get involved, because maybe there's barriers to entry. They have this idea of, I don't want to be that kid in the corner that doesn't fit in, if you're under 35. What do you think might be a good way to kind of get involved, and what are maybe the incentives?
So I think, as you very rightly said, Brittany, there's this whole kind of group or generation coming up that's very, very different to perhaps the kind of older generation in our chamber right at the moment. And, with COVID, it's really put a halt on our activities, which has been, frustrating. But we've gone out virtually, and as we know, we had your terrific webinar, and for a little while longer, I think we'll be continuing these. And what we've done as well, and what the nice thing, if you can say the nice thing about COVID, one of the opportunities that's come up is we're working with other chambers in the region. So we work with the Korean Chamber of Commerce as well, and they have a very young and dynamic leadership team. And I think this is where knowledge exchange and, building our network, not only here, but overseas as well. We work with the Queensland Chamber of Commerce too. Making our network really strong will really be beneficial to our members. And I think once planes start, and if this business bubble opens between Japan and Australia and Korea and what have you, the fact that we're on the ground, and we've been on the ground the whole time, and we have all this collective experience, it's going to be very, very valuable to businesses coming in and looking at opportunities, because there's going to be heaps of opportunities. And this is where I think for companies coming into the chamber, you're getting this terrific ecosystem, this terrific network of people. I don't really like the word mentor, but people who've been here for a long time, who you can talk to, people like you who you've got a very different the way you're working, and your company is very, very different to a lot of companies who are in the chamber already. But really interesting to get some new perspective and new ideas. So just this diversity is I think the diversity of our chamber is probably its strength, the diversity and the strong network we have, and the fact that we've got such strong links to the Japanese community. We work with the Tokyo and Japan Chamber of Commerce and Industry here, and we've got very, very strong links with them. And this is something that is really important. No matter how we change, and we've got changing businesses coming in, that old school network is really, really important, I think. And sorry, go ahead.
And I think that's really it. And maybe from the other side is that because this experience, these stories exist already so richly amongst the members, or amongst the chamber members, I would encourage other younger professionals, whether you're employed or whether you run your own company, to really get involved in the Australian New Zealand Chamber of Commerce, because I think as much as we've learned and we've written stories, what we also want to do is look to the future, and we want to write the new dialogue. And if we begin with page 1 today, well, that's such a shame, because we have so much learning, we have so much experience, and we have so many connections of people and relationships that it would be just unjust to leave that behind. So my personal suggestion or plea or whatever it is if you're a younger professional, Australian, New Zealand younger professional, certainly come and get involved in the chamber, because I think it's that together that we'll be able to redefine this new normal. We'll be able to redefine and kind of design this new dialogue about what it means to do business in Japan and what it means to do business in Australia. And I think we're going to need both of these perspectives, those that have kind of built where we are right now, but also those of us that are working on what we've built and then moving that forward. So that would definitely be my plea as well. If we were to think about the future, if we were to say just past COVID a little bit, not necessarily just now and in quarantine, but what's next for you? What's next for you? What's next for your industry? What's kind of on the horizon for you?
Well, for me, gosh, what's next? I've got so many things coming up. Are they actually going to come into fruition? I don't know, Brittany, because plans change very quickly nowadays. For the chamber, as I mentioned before, we've got this new committee coming up that will also have an extension with a young professional section as well. And we're really looking to work more in the regional areas of Japan too. So utilise the relationships we have with places like Kamaishi, Okayama, Odawara, these kind of regional areas that, we can really develop our relationship with. They're crying out for fresh, new ideas and energy and talent, and we can really build on our relationships with them to the benefit of new members and old members too, I think. So this is something that we're developing at the chamber, and once things calm down a little bit, we can start actually meeting in person and developing this. Looking forward to that. But with South Australia, the South Australian presence in Japan, we started a kind of branding called Tasting South Australia last year, and this was basically to get the Japanese more trade and consumer market to know about South Australia through what we're good at, which is our wine and food. And then this extends to international education, tourism, R&D, defence, renewable energy, everything. But so we're using this kind of branding to kind of get the what do you call that, hook out there as a bait, get people in. And so we've started our Instagram account, and we're doing live wine tutorials and gin tastings and cooking shows with a bunch of ambassadors who we have found. And some of them, we've got this wonderful girl from Two Rooms, a restaurant that's run by three guys here in Tokyo. You probably know it. It's kind of an institution. And this terrific girl who, I talked with one of the owners, and I said, I would really love to have just to help with the diversity, we'd really like to have a young up-and-coming woman, being one of our ambassadors. And he said, oh, look, I've got the perfect girl for you, this chef. And so she sent through some information for me, and it turns out she went to Seaview High School in South Australia.
Don't tell me that's where you went to high school.
I didn't, however. I didn't, but it's not far from where I went. And I just thought, how about that? There's just so much that comes into our lives that is, I don't know if it's just meant to be. We call this goen, as you know, the engaru. There's just something there that we're, just magical comes out of the universe. I don't know what, but it's, or just pure luck. I'm not sure. But so we've got these terrific ambassadors, and they all have a connection to South Australia in some point. Our wine ambassador, who we chose, I just met him at an event, and he was a really nice person, outgoing, loved wine, passionate. And I didn't realise his passion for South Australian wine until my husband brought home a magazine about meat, and there was an article about this fellow talking about how he had done a working holiday in South Australia, picking grapes in the Barossa. I couldn't believe it.
Well, I'm glad
life throws these things at you, Brittany.
So to wrap up, you're going to need to do all of these things that are coming ahead. You're going to need that very much your don't take no for an answer, that gumboto attitude that is so synonymous with Sally. It's not only there's wine, that's one, but the other one is definitely this gumboto attitude, this you can do it for an answer. So what would you say to the listeners as a wrap up? What are the things that they can do that helps them keep pushing past the no?
Well, Brittany, that is my mantra, because there's always a way. There's never a no. I think no, sometimes people saying no is just lazy because they can't be bothered. Not the person wanting to do something, but that person can't be bothered. It's too hard. It's tricky. So you've just got to go around it, and sometimes it means being a bit sneaky. I'm the first to admit that. Not sneaky, but just thinking outside of the box. You've got to think outside of the box, and you've also got to think, well, they can only say no, and if they say no, try again. And I think one thing that has really helped me is that I've never felt that I can't do something. I mean, I've maybe that sounds a little bit weird, but I've never had someone say, "Oh, you can't do that. You can't do that." I know my own limitations. Right. I know, I'm not the best at anything by any means, but no one said don't try ever in my life. So when I came to this, particularly in Japan, no wall, no, you can't do that, no, you can't do that, no, I wouldn't do that. Well, why not? That just sprung up in me, that why not? No one's ever said you can't try that before, so I'm going to keep trying. And I think also you've just got to remember that people have been in the same situation as you at some point. And I still think sometimes, God, what am I doing here? Particularly at the chamber. I used to get really nervous before our executive council meetings. It was at that time before I became chair. I was working for this wine company, and they were all, lawyers and heads of companies and, really great people. What am I doing here? And I'd have to give myself a pep talk. Yeah. I'm like, you're here because you're meant to be here, and you're representing the SMEs, and you're doing this and you're doing that. And so I'd just give myself that pep talk. Like, you have what they don't have. They have what you don't have, but you have what they don't have. Yeah. So come on.
I love that. And Sally, just to be respectful of your time, we've been so lucky to have so much of it. And I think that is the perfect way to close the episode, is that idea of, as much as you walk into the room and think, oh my gosh, I'm not like them, that's very much your power. That's very much your strength. And that's exactly the thing that help you push through that, as Sally coined it, the no wall. So on that note, so much for sharing your stories, your time, about what it's really like to do business in Japan. Thank you, Sally. You're welcome back on the podcast anytime.
Thank you, Brittany. It's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you for asking me. I'm good to be involved.